In these next two lectures, we are going to look at Isaiah 40 through 55, which some call Second Isaiah. Mainstream scholarship, for the most part, believes that these chapters or this section of Isaiah may have been written by a different person than Isaiah of Jerusalem, perhaps one of the disciples of Isaiah that is mentioned in chapter 8. The reason for this is that passages seem to refer to events during the exile. So 41 and 2 seem to speak of the destruction of Jerusalem in the past. Babylonia seems to be the present setting. There's no real emphasis on Assyria. And Cyrus the Persian, who will be the one who brings Babylon down, is spoken of as the coming deliverer. The text, by the way, is almost entirely poetry. There's very little narrative, so it's hard to connect it through that to a particular political period. This is unlike Isaiah 1 through 39, have narrative passages which tie everything to a particular king. So again, why is it thought that this might be by a different person, one of the disciples of Isaiah? In 41 and 2, it speaks as though Jerusalem's penalty is paid, that she has already gone through suffering, and now God is bringing comfort. In 43:14, it talks of breaking down the bars of Babylon and the shouting of the Chaldeans being turned to lamentation. And this is something that would have taken place in the 6th century. In 48:20, it refers to something that looks a little bit like an exodus from Babylon. Go out from Babylon, flee from Chaldea. Declare this with a shout of joy. Send it forth to the end of the earth. Say, the Lord has redeemed his servant Jacob. So certainly the prophecies speak to that time of exile and the coming liberation from Babylon. The prophecies regarding Cyrus are particularly interesting. In chapter 44, it refers to Cyrus as the Lord's shepherd carrying out his purpose, who says of Jerusalem, it shall be rebuilt, and of the temple your foundation shall be laid, which presupposes that Jerusalem and the temple have been destroyed in the past. Chapter 45 even refers to Cyrus as his anointed. And Cyrus is the king of Persia in the 6th century. And God will go before Cyrus and level the mountains, break in pieces the doors of bronze, and cut through the bars of iron. Throughout these chapters, we have themes of a new exodus, but this time from Babylon, not from Egypt. But the exodus from Egypt serves as a model for what will happen to the people coming home from exile. Another theme is the redemption of Jerusalem, the setting free of Jerusalem. Creation is another theme because God had created the world, he is powerful enough to bring Israel out of captivity. A number of chapters speak of the servant of Yahweh. These are the servant songs familiar to Christian tradition. This servant will bring justice to the nations, will be a light to the nations, but who will be abused in the course of his mission and bear the iniquities of the people. And the other theme is Cyrus the Persian as a kind of deliverer and even some kind of anointed one, some kind of Messiah. So let's look at the new Exodus. In chapter 40, it begins, "In the wilderness prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, every mountain and hill be made low. The glory of the Lord shall be revealed." In chapter 43, talks about the Lord making a way in the sea, a path in the mighty waters, who brings out chariot and horses, army and warrior. They lie down, they cannot rise. Again, a reference to the Exodus from Egypt, where Pharaoh and his warriors are drowned in the sea. In verse 19, we see, "I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." We recall Exodus 15:21, "And Miriam sang to them, Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea." It is said that Jerusalem will be redeemed. In chapter 52, Zion, Jerusalem, is invited to put on beautiful garments, and it is stated that the uncircumcised and the unclean shall enter no more. It refers to, "O captive Jerusalem, who will now be made free, be set free." And then in verse 7, "How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of the messenger who announces peace, who brings good news, who announces salvation, who says to Zion, Your God reigns." In verse 9, it talks about the ruins of Jerusalem. And yet in verse 8 we see that there is the return of the Lord to Zion. And further on in verse 9, the Lord has comforted his people, he has redeemed Jerusalem. And in verse 10, the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God.